This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Calendar. Let's be real. Running a household can be exhausting and chaotic. And finding the perfect Mother's Day gift, it's not exactly a no-brainer. Until now. The Skylight Calendar is the best way to organize the family and give everyone, especially mom, some peace of mind to enjoy the things that matter most. The Skylight Calendar is a smart, touchscreen calendar that keeps track of and manages the chores, dinner planning, groceries, and to-dos for the whole family. The Skylight Calendar automatically syncs each family member's digital calendars and displays them all together on one color-coded touchscreen. It even doubles as a digital picture frame, so you can finally share all those special moments that are just sitting on your phone. As a limited-time offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Calendar when you go to skylightcal.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightcal.com/easy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga, Birth, Babies. And today we're talking about the constant togetherness of families during this pandemic and the wide emotions that's felt during that. The idea of feeling like you have a short fuse, you don't have space, you might still feel isolated and lonely. How to navigate family, how to navigate relationships, how to nurture those relationships, how to not go nuts when you never have alone time. How do you parent during this time with complete togetherness? And so to have this conversation, I reached out to a longtime guest. Michelle we figured out 4 different podcasts with me because she's just fantastic. So I have Michelle Canarick. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and mother of 2 young children. With over 13 years of providing children, adolescents, and adults with therapy, and through her own experience, Michelle has gained a specific passion for supporting New York City mothers and the experience of building their families. And she's really the perfect person to have this conversation. One of my favorite things Michelle says is the way she carved up some space to continue her therapy. She would hold sessions from her bathtub, which I think is fantastic. I need to start doing that. So I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. She really gave me some things to think about and some tools I actually immediately used with my own kids. Before we get to that conversation, I want to announce I have 2 different donations I'm going to ask you to think about offering towards. The first is a scholarship fund for our teacher training for the PYC population. We really want to create a space for everyone to be able to take our training. So we're starting a scholarship fund. So there's a donation button for that if you choose to offer and give. That is on our teacher training page, as well as a donation button for continuing the Prenatal Yoga Center's programming during this pandemic. It's a lot. We were hoping to be back in the studio soon, and it doesn't look like that. Luckily, we have an amazing online community, but it's definitely not as robust as what it was when we were in the studio. So I'm just putting it out there. If it's within your means and this means something to you to have this podcast, please consider either of those donations. Also, I just want to remind you, we've got all our classes online. This morning's class was so fun. We had 13 people in our prenatal class, and we stayed after for at least 10 minutes and answered questions about epidurals and the peanut ball. And I gave some suggestions for books and the kind of the baggage we carry from our families, how they birth. So we really kind of dug into some fantastic conversations. And it's kind of amazing that even when we're not together in the studio having these face-to-face classes and conversations, they're still so rich and supportive. So I want to thank my Friday morning 10 a.m. class who showed up with amazing support for each other and questions. So these classes will continue to go forth well after we open the doors again. Now, I'm proud to say that our September-October teacher training is full, and we just got the go-ahead from Yoga Alliance to continue our online training. So we are doing a November-December online training. I am so incredibly proud of this training. This is our Prenatal Yoga Center 85-hour teacher training. Check it out. And then don't forget, we've got our online courses, Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi and Teaching the Postnatal Student. Our online offers are growing, and I'm so proud of them. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, please enjoy this conversation with Michelle.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Michelle, oh my gosh, I think is this our third podcast? You know, I keep coming to you with every question for a therapist. I'm like, oh, Michelle will answer this.
I think it might actually be our fourth podcast.
It's
I was
possible.
thinking about that this morning. We have done a lot over the years together.
We have, and actually my very, very, very favorite is what we call child-proofing your marriage. I refer to that all the time. So I will make sure the links to all our multiple chats together are at the bottom of this because you are a wealth of knowledge. So clearly I know you and your work, but we tell our community, our audience, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a therapist on the Upper West Side. I've been working for about 15 years on the Upper West Side in private practice since my son was born, which is 10 years ago, which I cannot believe. I think that I've been working with your population, Deb, since my kids were about 2 and 3 years old, but now they're 10 and 11. So I'm a mom on the Upper West Side and a therapist on the Upper West Side, and I love my work with moms and new moms specifically. I try to always help moms to identify the unique struggles inherent in motherhood, to understand them at the different stages, and to help them find compassion for themselves, empathy for their kids, and to see how the relationships with their kids really kind of come up against the same struggles that they find in other relationships. So help identify the patterns inside relationships that kind of interfere with the deep connections that they want to have with their kids.
Oh, that's such important work. And as my kids get older, I definitely see some parallel of how I relate to them and everyone else.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting time. And the reason I called you up for yet another conversation is relationships are getting, my experience with my family, a little tough right now because we are together all the time. I mean, all the time. And I know things are slightly changing. You know, there's a little more openness. But, you know, we're still social distancing. We did kind of open our pod to our next door neighbors so that our kids have at least one other person to play with. But the togetherness, I hear it's a struggle for many. So I thought we could jump into navigating those waters of constant togetherness. So I guess the first one is, how has this experience been for you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, I'm shaking. If you could see me, you would see that I'm shaking my head yes to everything you just said, both because I hear from my patients all of their struggles, but I also, and this is the very first time, absent 9/11, where it was also the same experience, although that was a shorter experience, where my life is really parallel to the lives of the people I'm working with, and where the things I'm navigating and trying to work through are so much of what the people that I'm working with in my practice are trying to navigate. And while everyone's sort of dealing with their own personal issues, there's still so much parallels. In my life personally, and I'm going to just talk about me for a second, I think the biggest struggle that I've had has been the journey. I would call it like a journey to find my space, find my space inside my house. In the very start of quarantine, I was literally sitting in my bathtub, taking phone calls, FaceTiming with friends, and doing some therapy sessions like from my bathroom while my husband was in my bedroom doing work and the kids were in their rooms at school. And we have a puppy, so we were training him and he was in the living room. And so my space was my bathroom. And I actually thought of it as like a metaphor for what women in particular, moms, are struggling with in this quarantine is finding space to physically be, finding space to take care of themselves, finding space to get the things done that they need to get done, finding space to talk to friends, while also taking care of all of the other people in their lives. Another thing I've been really thinking about and experiencing for my own self is that more than ever before, the buck really stops with me. All of my support systems, whether it's family or babysitters or other types of childcare providers, are no longer a factor in my life, and we're not able to get to them. They're not able to get to us. So whatever needs to get done, it's me. And I feel like I have to just, we're talking about quarantine, but I have to acknowledge that there's another thing happening in our society, which is the understanding and the recognition of all the social injustices that have been a problem in our society. We are so aware of them right now, which is wonderful. And it's really made me think particularly about my own privilege. And when I say that the buck stops here, I recognize that that's a privileged statement, in that it hasn't always been that way for me. I've had the privilege of having support systems. So while I'm sort of struggling with that in my life, I'm also struggling with and reconciling that with the fact that that is a privilege that I've had, and thinking a lot about people who have had different lives and the way race interplays with that. So the quarantine has and the Black Lives Matter movement and what we've been watching politically and in the world, and has really made me think a lot about these different aspects of my own personal life. As a therapist, this has been a roller coaster for me, where I've had a lot of different levels of energy for dealing with all the different feelings that people are kind of saying and sharing with me. I've always been able to hold other people's experiences during quarantine because they're so parallel to my own life. It's been a lot harder to hold it all without being personally impacted. So that's been something that I specifically have been kind of reconciling with as well.
I really appreciate your open honesty about that.
Thanks. Yeah.
That there are struggles. So, my husband's a social worker, so he does therapy. In fact, his little office is, luckily we have a very big and bright laundry room. So he sits in the laundry room and does his sessions. So you're in the bathroom, he's in the laundry room. But I understand, I've thought how therapists hold the space for others to, you're listening to some big things without it impacting you. I can imagine if you're hearing, almost kind of like re-traumatizing yourself every time you're listening to someone else's story, how that could be a challenge. So I do appreciate that you did share that.
Yeah, I will say thank you. And I will say that one of the highlights for me of this time has been the humanizing factor that's happened for me, where I am a person in the therapy space differently than I have been and more than I have been. And it's opened up a lot of relationship conversations that have been wonderful between me and my patients. And I've been so moved and touched by the people who ask me how I am and really, really care, where they see me as a person experiencing difficulties and want to know more. And I had one woman who I've known for a long time. She's a mom who actually said to me in the beginning of quarantine, maybe the first week, I know that I'm not supposed to say this to you, or I know that you're not really going to do it, but if you need to talk, you can call me. And it was just such a wonderful, beautiful moment. And so while it has been a struggle, there have been some really, really powerful bonding experiences that have been just really moving. I'm kind of getting moved right now thinking about it. So it's been a mixed bag, I would say.
So let's shift a little to, you are still doing the therapy. And I know this is a really big question, and we can break it down to little mini questions within it. But as a therapist, what have you heard as the biggest struggles for, it's kind of a big question again, individuals, couples, families? And because everyone has I can imagine this constant togetherness. And then we can also later talk about, the loneliness. Like right now, I have some friends that are not within a family and they're on their own. And there's moments I'm like, wouldn't that be amazing? And then I think, but they could be really lonely. So we'll kind of break that down as we go forward. But just kind of like give me the big hitters as the biggest struggles.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most obvious one is keeping everyone safe, keeping your kids, yourselves, your broader family safe. I think everyone's having a bit of loneliness, even when people are on top of them and they're on top of others, because you're not necessarily able to connect in the same way with the people outside of your pod, your immediate family. As you used to be, or as you were. I think that the biggest challenge is trying to let go of the normal and trying to embrace the current, and whatever that means, like balancing what you believe is right as a parent, what you have your values that have always kind of led you as a parent with what your reality is currently. I'll give you an example of that. In my own life, I've allowed my kids to have iCloud accounts and text with their friends and FaceTime with their friends. They have way more screen time than they ever had before. And I'm encouraging it in ways because it's their way to connect with their friend. But I had very strong beliefs around screen time and around when my kids would have ability to text and the freedom to communicate with their friends. And I'm going to tell you, that was not 10 and 11 years old where they were going to have full access. And I've had to kind of adapt. I think parents with little kids are adapting also in different ways. They're trying to let go of some of the things that some of the things I've driven them as parents, they're having to let go of and having to rethink and reshape and kind of come up with different alternatives when they're working at home and have little kids who are running around and need their attention. And parents of teens are struggling with pressure from their kids to see their friends. They have been struggling from day one. And as always, and maybe more even, so they're seeing extreme differences in parenting practices and trying to balance their beliefs and their beliefs for their families with the beliefs of their kids' friends, parents, and their friends, their friends' parent, and the way their friends are parenting. So I think that it's like accepting the reality of the current situation as the current situation keeps rolling and changing, and trying to balance that with their actual beliefs and the way they want to be parenting. Because I don't think any of us are truly parenting the way we want to be parenting in regular life, but we are trying to figure out how to parent in this scenario.
I love what you said, and I'm going to relate. Yeah, we are definitely struggling with, and I have a lot of guilt about that, not parenting how I want, and really the worst qualities of my personality are coming out as a parent. Like my husband and I just had a conversation. We're like, are we really like permanently damaging them? I'm usually a pretty calm person, but and you may hear this from your clients, but my fuse has gotten so short that I'll be calm, and then it's a bit of rage and yelling far more than I ever have. And I know I'm not the only one because I can actually hear our other neighbors, which gives me a little bit of validation. But then, like you said, there's also different families are going to have different values. And as I mentioned, like we've really been quite social distancing, but then we have other families in the neighborhood or not. And then my kid's like, well, they're all out playing. Why can't we be with, 10 or 15 other kids?
Exactly.
And it becomes a conversation about family values. And then they start to feel a little left out. And then these are for older kids. And some of our community may not have that. They may have the other struggle, like you said, that some of their values have to be shifted if you have little kids. Right. Maybe you wanted to not have a ton of screen time, but if you're working, there's not a lot of options. Right. So I'm guessing, I feel like boundaries are getting very blurred. So do you have other suggestions for how to parent, and I'm going to put that in quotes, as best you can during these circumstances. Because as you mentioned, like, I think many of us don't feel like we're doing a great job. Or do we
Yeah,
just need to
no,
be easier on ourselves?
well, yes, thank you. I feel like, so what you said, and I'm going to kind of normalize it a little bit. And what I have been saying, every client that I work with, and anyone else who wants to hear it, so I might as well share it with your audience. We are in survival. And when we're in survival, like psychologically, when we're in survival, we use our most primitive defense mechanisms. So the things that are our triggers become extreme triggers. And the way we cope with those triggers aren't always our most mature defense strategies. So that often does not look like your best self. So as you just said, Deb, like exactly what you just said, that you're trying really hard and you're keeping it together as best you can, and you're using the strategies that have worked for you, but they're not always going to work at this time, and they're not always the most adaptive and mature strategies. So, you might be having a shorter fuse and kind of resorting to and experiencing anger. Other people might be experiencing extreme sadness. And so what they might be doing is crying a lot. And I'm hearing about all of those things, from both anger, yelling, sadness, tears, anxiety, obsessive thinking, all those different kind of strategies and those different reactions from multiple people all the time. And so you're not alone in what you just said. And I think that we all as moms have to, and I don't know if this is going to be helpful or it's going to sound cliche, but I'm going to say it, like, we have to be kind to ourselves and have compassion for ourselves and my metaphor of the bathtub finding my space, it's like, find your space. And it's so hard to do when you're living on top of people. But it's whatever it looks like for you, whether it's taking a walk, whether it is taking a bath, whether it's locking yourself in your bathroom, whether it's putting on face masks. I mean, people keep commenting to me because my nails are polished every single day. I have been, I don't know why. I can't really understand it, but it makes me feel better to have polished nails. So I've been manicuring my nails once a week as if it's part of my routine, because it is a space that it's a time where I sit by myself and do my nails, and it makes me feel better. So finding whatever it is that can make you feel better, because we all need to be taking good care of ourselves. If it's baking, if it's watching TV, if it's, self-care in the form of like face masks and manicures, whether it's talking to your mom on the phone, whether it's saying like, I'm sorry, kid, right now, I need some time on my own, and, putting them in front of the TV or in front of the iPad to get that little break, it's going to do a load of good in regards to your relationships with them and your ability to not cry or not yell, and also recognize that you will cry and you will yell. And I think that repair is, for me, the thing that always makes me feel it's like my safety net is that I can repair whatever damage I have done. And by going to my child and saying, that didn't feel good for me, I think that didn't feel good for you, and let's kind of talk it through and let's hug it out and kind of see where we can go and be better next time.
I'm so glad you said that, because I do feel guilty after I yell at them, and
Sure.
I need to be more. And I'm so glad that you did go that route, because I think many of us feel like, are we causing full on damage? So acknowledging, because we can't, I think a lot of us just put this pressure on ourselves to, hold together and be the best parent we can. But under these circumstances, it's such strain. It's really hard for so many. And I can imagine with a brand new baby, which is what a lot of my community has, without that help of family around, that could also feel like a heavy drain. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, here's a pretty big question. How can people not let disagreements escalate to when we're constantly together? We're going to take a quick break when we come back.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try. You know how to book flights and hotels. All you're missing is a tool to plan the travel experiences you'll have once you arrive. That's why you need Viator. Book guided tours, activities, excursions, and more in one place to make your trip truly unforgettable. Viator has over 300,000 travel experiences to choose from. Everything from simple tours to extreme adventures and all the niche, interesting stuff in between. So you can plan something that everyone you're traveling with will enjoy. Real traveler reviews give the inside scoop from people who've already been on the experiences you're considering. So you can plan with confidence. Free cancellation helps you plan for the unexpected. And 24/7 customer support means you can travel worry-free. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. Find travel experiences for you. Do more with Viator.
Okay, we are back. All right, so when our fuse is short and we have constant togetherness, we're kind of on top of each other, how do we not let disagreements escalate?
Well, first of all, I think it's sort of what I was just saying before is they will. And so have the understanding for yourself and the compassion for yourself that you're not going to do this perfectly. This is not regular times. As one person said to me, this is everyone's first global pandemic. We are all in this, like we are all kind of winging it. So it's not going to be perfect. When they escalate, take a minute, give yourself a breath, take some breaths, give yourself, a pause. And there are things you can do, but after the fact, make sure you kind of are kind to yourself about the fact that didn't go as well as you wanted it to. I think that my best advice is really to try to listen to each other's perspectives and to recognize that everybody is in survival together and not at their best. So their perspective might be more rigid. It might be more, whatever the things are that person, your family members, most primitive defenses, that's where you're up against. So you're at your most primitive, they're at their most primitive. So, I'll just use my own family as an example. My daughter can get rigid. She is her most rigid right now. So I have to kind of talk to a rigid child in a different way than I would talk to her at her best self. And help her to understand what's going on for her, but also go at it in a different way. Listening to her perspective does me and her a world of good, where I hear her and I can try to put myself in her shoes and understand why something is so important to her, even if it's not so important to me, and then work from there. So it's listening to each other, having some empathy, and kind of recognizing that your partner, your child, yourself, your mother, your friend, we're all going at this from a little bit of a different space than we would have been and that we usually are. And it's, having some understanding of that and trying to talk to that person instead of talking to the person that we've always been talking to.
Does that really
make
helpful?
Sense?
That absolutely,
Okay.
That really does, because we in my house have definitely been dealing with some behavior issues. My son's always been a little anxious and very easily stressed, but it has gotten to a new level. And when I've talked to some of my friends and his teachers, they said that's not uncommon. which also, again, I felt slightly validated.
Yeah.
So hearing that recognizing I need to be a little more flexible, as well as recognize his stress is going to be really on the forefront, and then trying to approach it with that understanding, I think will help us. But what about parents where they're younger kids and they're not able to, like, they haven't figured out what's going on? Like, think like little kids. Like, I'm thinking, like, my kids are 6 and 8, so I have, we have communication, but I can imagine like a toddler, they're kind of stuck inside. They don't have quite the circle of people around, and they may not be able to articulate, or the parent may not understand. How does someone handle a kid, like a baby? I'm assuming doesn't really know what's going on, but like once they're mobile and cognitive, they do to some extent.
Yeah, sure. And they're also, very pent up. So I guess for toddlers, if I'm going to offer some advice, would be to try to understand their sensory needs, and try to fulfill their sensory needs. Whether it's, if their sensory needs are in the form of movement, schedule into your day some times where they can move around, dance parties, playing tag, maybe catching a ball, even though it's a small space. Getting outside as much as you can to allow them some space to run around. If their sensory needs are more with their hands, doing crafts, Play-Doh, sand, all the stuff that you don't necessarily allow in your house, even glitter, making some allowances for that. Some kids, it's snuggles, like they just need to be held. So reading books together, lying on the couch, watching shows together, giving them some snuggles, and some loveys to snuggle with. So it's like looking for the things that maybe would make them feel comfortable and get some of their sensory needs stimulated.
That makes a lot of sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, I totally appreciate what you said, Deb, that, I have, and I always recognize that, I'm a psychologist and a mom, and being a psychologist gives me sort of more insight into what's going on with my kids. Although I have to say that being a mother is the most humbling experience of my life, because I'm constantly making mistakes and missing the boat and seeing them in different ways and letting my own, my own stuff get in the way of my parenting. But I do recognize that I have an advantage here in that, with my background and also the age of my kids, where I remember being a new mom and having little kids and toddlers and being like playing detective all day long. Who is this child? What's getting to them? And how can I help them the most? And I feel like putting on that detective hat and sort of seeing the times of day where they're struggling the most, the way the day is structured, what's working, what's not working, and kind of trying to tailor the day a little bit more so that things work more. And, maybe creating more structure, adding certain activities into the day that seem to be calming or seem to be, meeting those sensory needs. It's really hard because they don't speak and they can't say, "Hey, Mom, this is what I'm feeling." But, my bigger kids don't really do that either. But I know that I remember being a mom of the little kids and really, really feeling like a detective and trying to figure them out. So I appreciate that. And I think that is a challenge.
It really is. So let's talk. So we've talked about kind of the constant togetherness. Let's shift a little bit to the other side of loneliness. I can imagine some people, and I really like that you said, you can still be lonely. And I realize I have that sometimes. Like I miss my friends. And even though we're texting and I try to get some calls in, I do miss just being like, hey, I'm going to take a little break. Let's meet for coffee. So there's that loneliness, but then somebody may not be within a family. So what advice would you give to someone that does have that sense of isolation? Then I have another question about the isolation after. I have several isolation questions. So I guess we can talk about the first one, just handling the loneliness.
Yeah, I think the loneliness is, it's such a predominant emotion that I have been hearing across the board from people who are with other people in the house and also, and maybe more so from the people who are alone. And I think that for all of the people who are alone, it's really important to be more flexible. Be more flexible in your own self. For new moms, new moms can, out of anxiety, can get fairly rigid in terms of, and the best of circumstances, in regards to taking their kids out or letting other people in. And in this quarantine where you're being told to stay home, it's like you, it's really triggering all of those experiences that new moms have anyway. So my best advice for them is like, try to be a little less rigid about this. Open up your pod a little bit, let people in if you can, only if you feel safe and if you know they've been safe. And look for the people who have sort of been doing this quarantine in the same way you have been, and try to kind of meet up. And that might look like meeting up outside. That might look like having picnics in the park, or visiting a parent or a sibling or a friend and sitting on the driveway. But try to find ways to be safe, socially distant, and also be together. Scheduling FaceTime calls, FaceTime coffee. I mean, I have been once a week having FaceTime coffee with my very close friend. I think that's really important. Obviously it's not the same, but again, we're letting go of the same and we're letting go of the normal and trying to adapt and find ways that we can find camaraderie. So, if it's online support groups, picnics in the park, visits from family, walks in the park, walks outside, even just to see other people and to smile at other people under your mask, it will make you feel better. But yes, it is very hard. Also, new parents, new moms in particular, really try to go it alone. They really feel like all of that, the experiences of insecurity of I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this well, I can't take care of my baby, sort of make new moms keep their struggles to themselves. Right now, as much, if not more than all the other times, it's so crucial to open up and talk and say, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm thinking, and find the normalcy in it, or find the support from their friends, from their family, from other people who have lived this and are living it, to hear from each other and take care of each other, and to know that you are not alone. You're actually not alone. You might physically be alone, but there's a whole village out there of people who have lived it and done it and are doing it and are living it, who want to connect and find those people.
I will say,
however that may look like.
Our new mom support groups have always been really a strong part of our community, but they are really thriving. Like, people are craving to connect. And I see that in some of the themes I know that's come up in the new mom support groups is they are, obviously they're new parents, but their partner may be working from home and they feel even more isolated, that they're just with this baby and they're trying to figure that out. So I definitely see people craving the connection.
I just want to say something about the partner working from home. And also if you're working from home, but I'm going to start with the partner working from home, is very confusing. It's very confusing because they're physically accessible, but they're emotionally not accessible. And I think that that is something that people are really struggling with, whether they have a new baby or a toddler or a middle schooler. They're really struggling with the fact that their partner is like at arm's length away, and yet they're so distant when they're working. And finding ways to talk about that and change expectations and talk about reasonable expectations inside the partnership is so important. And as a working mom, that's a conversation I've had to have with my kids. Like, what does that feel like for you when I am physically present but emotionally not present? Because that's not something that we struggle with on a day-to-day in our regular lives. We all play different roles and wear different hats, and a lot of times we wear those hats physically separate from our families. But right now, our mother role, our work role, our spouse role, our partner role, they're all, our mother, our daughter role, our sister role, our friend role, they're all merging. The boundaries, as you said before, the boundaries are so blurry. And we have to recognize that that is part of the problem here and part of the thing that we're dealing with, and really address it inside our families and inside ourselves.
I'm so moved by what you said, because I literally had that conversation and little epiphany today, that my son's birthday is coming up. So he just got a brand new bike and he's so excited. It's a new gear bike. It's a big deal for him. And he wanted to go for a bike ride with me because I actually love outdoor cycling. And we went on a ride, but I said, I can't be that long. I do have to work. And he just is like, but you're always working. Why are you always working? And for a moment I was able, and I've been hearing this for months, but there was a moment there I did step back. I'm like, in his eyes, that's what he sees. I mean, I always was working. I love what I do.
Yes.
I love my business. But he didn't really see it because he was at school or camp or karate or blah, blah, all that.
Because he had his own space.
Right. And it really, it just, and even as I talk about it, it kind of like hits me in the heart. That's what he sees. And I said, we are always working. Like both my husband and I work, and we're not one. And then we have a lot of families around us that the mother doesn't work. And I feel, and then talk about, let's add some more, like there's some guilt there. Like I have the guilt of like, I am always working. And in the past I could show them like, I love what I do and it's so good for our family. But now he sees it as taking away, like it's taking away from their time. And I find it really hard. So I did have that moment of like, I'm so sorry that I am always working, and I do try to find time with them. And before, when they had school, I worked pretty much up until I picked them up, and then I gave them, my time, and then I picked up work. But
I think that
it's blurry.
Yeah, I think first of all, you're not always working, right?
It feels like I'm always working.
Well, but you're not, and I think that you have to sort of break through with the nevers and always, because those are not factual statements. And it's important.
I'm going to say I do actually, I'd say a good 75% of my day, because with the studio, I've actually taken on most of it. So they do see me 75% of the day. I am working.
Right. So, but then there's still a 25% of the day where you can be with them.
Yes.
And I would say, differentiating that, like, yes, I am working a lot, validating that. And also, I am trying very hard to be with you. And here's all the fun things that we've done, so that you're kind of talking about both things. You're validating it and also saying, well, the reality is that there's two realities. And also, scheduling touch points with your children, for you, with me, for me, I've been doing this where I schedule touch points in my day, where I am making sure that I am in the kitchen when they're in the kitchen. Not all the time, but, at noon every day from it's the start of quarantine at 12 p.m. we have met as a family to spend at least 15 minutes eating lunch. And that's been really important in our day. I have made a point to schedule touch points with my kids, each of them, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for just a hug, to just say, hi, and I'm here, and I see you, and I recognize you, and we're going to just like be together for the second. And also point out, I've also done a lot of pointing out to my kids what their space is and how they too they're accessible physically to me, but not emotionally at all times, because they're with their friends on FaceTime, or they're watching a TV show, or they're in a math class, or they're, taking a shower, or whatever it is, practicing their guitar. Like, those are times where I don't bother them. They don't bother me at the times that I'm doing my thing. And we meet together at the times that are our times, and scheduling those and being really intentional about those times.
That's really helpful. And you actually answered my question about nurturing relationships, because giving time, and I do appreciate you remind me I'm not always working, that I do give them time. It feels like I am. But to remind me to be even more intentional. I like that. Yes. More intentional about the time. Like my daughter the other day, she wanted me to sit and play Legos with her. And exhausted, but I thought, I need to do this for her. She needs to have me physically with her. Phone was not with me. Like, I really had to physically be present. And I think a lot of us have to intentionally do that. I do have another question about how much we should be sharing with little kids about what's going on. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about, because my daughter calls it the sickness. And when the sickness is over, I will be right back.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, we're back. So how much do we share and not freak them out?
I think this may be the hardest of the questions. This is it's a personal question. I think it's important for you to understand your kid and what they can metabolize. If you're living in New York City, I have said a number of occasions that it really feels like the front lines of a war zone. Has at different times felt that way, and there's not an avoidance of your kids seeing and understanding what's happening. Recognizing that their lives have been so drastically altered by this event, by the fact that they're not in school, even as young as 2 years old, not in school. They're not seeing their friends. They're not seeing grandma and grandpa. They're not seeing aunts and uncles and cousins in the same way that they were used to. And they are seeing their parents in very different ways than they are used to. So as much as your child can metabolize, that's as much as you should be talking about it, because they are trying to put these pieces together, and you can't avoid it. You just can't ignore it, but you do have to do it based on the level of your particular child. And you know that more than anybody else, but don't try to avoid it, because it's unavoidable, and they're seeing a lot, and they are making assumptions in their head and trying to put the pieces together. So give them the facts as much as they can understand.
Yeah, I realized I always listen to NPR in the morning, and I realized I had to stop doing that because it was actually freaking my son out. He was like, coronavirus, everything. And then something in totally different perspectives. My youngest has this doll that she's had forever, and she's like, it's called Guy, because we're like, where's that guy? And then now he has the name Guy. So she said, look at Guy's hat. And I'm like, oh, that's so cute. She goes, and it can also be his mask. And I'm like, oh, that's your reality. It just was really interesting how that just, eased into, that's her reality. It actually kind of stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that, this is their current reality. Their past reality is still with them, and their future reality will still be with them when we get there. So all of these things will integrate for them, and they are much more resilient than we are. And we have to remember that this will have an impact on them. We don't quite know yet what that impact will be, but we can't make negative predictions into the future and say it's going to be traumatic or it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a life event that stays with them and that they hold on to and that they grow from. But we don't know exactly what that will be, and it isn't necessarily negative. So it's kind of letting that unravel as it is and having conversations with them, trying to make them, make sure they're not scared, make sure they're making good decisions, that they're understanding that their behavior impacts other people. It's a great time to explain that to them and help them understand that their behavior, such as wearing a mask, impacts the health and safety of other people outside. That's something they can understand. And just in your own self, try to remember that kids are way more resilient than we are. They're way less rigid, even though sometimes they are rigid. They're way less rigid in their integration of new material than we are as adults. And try to tamper down the negative predictions that you might be making based on your own anxiety.
That is such great information, great advice. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to add or I should have asked?
Yeah. Well, I want to just add in terms of like nurturing relationships. When you just said that before, I was thinking about my own family, and I was thinking about sharing this because I think this is really could be very helpful to other people. One of the most beautiful surprises for me has been that the way my family has become interested in each other because they are seeing, as I said before, they're seeing all the different hats. We are all seeing all the different hats that each of us wears and becoming much more interested and taking the time to ask each other about our days. My 10-year-old son will ask me at the end of my day, how was your day? What did you learn? Like, he'll ask me about particular things that I've told him about, follow up with them. He'll follow up. My daughter will follow up with my husband about some of the things he's working on. And I think in terms of nurturing a relationship, curiosity and interest in each other goes a really long way in building bonds. And I have been so moved by the curiosity and interest that I've been experiencing in my own house. And I've been making very big efforts to be curious and interested in all of the people in my family. And I think that that's something that could really help to, help with perspective taking, help with the empathy and compassion for each other, and help to kind of calm each other's nerves. So lead by example, try to ask your kids about the toys that they're playing with or the games that they're doing, the games they're interacting with, their friends that they're talking to on FaceTime, their math class and their English lesson if they're still in school, and talk about yourself in a way that you don't always do, and see if where you can go with that in building relationships.
That is great advice. I'm going to try that tonight. I realize that things have gotten a lot smaller. We've always at dinner, I'd be like, tell me about your day. But now I'm like, I know all about your day, but I can try. Our conversations have got a little smaller, but yes, I can try to dig deeper.
Use that knowledge, use that knowledge and follow up. Like, so how was that thing that you did? And what did you like about that activity? Because you know way more and the boundaries are way blurred. But in that way, but there's something that you can gain from those blurred boundaries as opposed to it only being a loss.
That is great. Where can people find your work?
Well, they can find me sitting in my bathtub. No, I have a website. It's mycmomsupport.com. People can go to that website and find my phone number and my email address. I am accepting some new clients. I will take a little bit of a summer break, but I'm still taking on new people. In the fall, I'm hoping to be back in my office at least a little bit, but I'm still working out those details. I think those are the best ways. That's the best way to find me is by going to my website.
I'll make sure to have that in the show notes. Oh, Michelle, once again, a fantastic opportunity to chat with you. I just love picking at your brain. You're so insightful and compassionate. I really appreciate your time and everything you offer.
And you said before that you want to be more intentional. You are such a thoughtful and intentional parent, which is why you come up with such interesting questions and why the two of us can have these talks and people can learn from them.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.